Good morning. I'm filming this on a really cold day. I can see my breath out here in the garage. Um, we're going to talk about using that actual hand plane today. Uh, we talked about what to look for when you're buying some used tools. You know what would make a good tool, you know, better than another when you're just looking at probably a bin of tools at a flea market. We talked about the actual restoration of our hand plane, and now let's use it. Uh, I've got a vise. This is not a woodworking vise. This is a metal. I'd actually call it a general vise, but it's really made to hold steel, metal, whatever. It's got jaws on it that when we open up our vise, it's gonna damage our wood. So we've got some options. We're gonna take and we're gonna actually set up our hand plane today. We're gonna joint this piece of lumber, and then I'm gonna show you how to just knock off an edge, or ease an edge they call it. The problem is if I use this vise and I tighten it up, it's gonna leave marks. So one way around this is I could take some scrap wood and put it on the sides where it's gonna pinch. That way it damages the scrap wood and not my actual piece of material I wanna use. For this is a piece of scrap wood I'm gonna use for demonstration. So I don't care if it dents it or not. But be aware of that. People will go, oh, I'll put it in the vise, or we could clamp it down to the table too somehow if I can clamp it this way. But the vise is just really nice to have. So I'm gonna get this, put it in here nice and level. Make sure my vise isn't gonna move on me too much. Make sure the dogs are tightened. It's good. If you've seen the video, this is the vise that I fixed up. I've already got dings and dents, and I've been using it, and that's okay. Hey, remember that hand plane that I fixed up and wire wheeled? Here it is. If you remember back to when we first looked at it, it had surface rust. Now it has actually a shine to it. It's in pretty good shape. I was gonna take the adjust wheel off and soak it in vinegar so it brings out the brass color, but I said, you know what, it's gonna get used. Whatever. We'll if I'm really worried about it, I can cross that bridge another time. I did re-glue my handle. The handle's back on, but it's ready to use. I know you're thinking, well, it still looks old. Yeah, it's an old tool. Does it work? We're gonna find out. So step one in setting up the hand tool. Here's the tools that you're gonna need. You're gonna need a scrap piece of wood. Do not say, okay, I'll start off with the piece of wood I'm gonna use. No, use a piece of scrap wood. You'll need your hand plane. Second thing you're gonna need, well, and before we can get started, I did sharpen the blade. I went back and I really worked on it. Those chips that were on the side were really a pain in the doompa, if you know what I mean. The other thing you're going to need is either a small brass mallet, a wooden mallet, or just use a piece of scrap wood. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to be probably having to adjust the blade by physically hitting it just a little tiny bit to knock it over. But again, a piece of scrap wood will work. That's all you're going to need. We don't ever want to use an actual steel hammer like what you'd use to pound nails in, because metal on metal is it's going to fold over the edge. It's going to damage our hand plane. We don't want to do that. This is a nice tool. So step one, flip this thing over. Take your hand and very carefully feel the blade. This one, I can already feel there's a high spot here, and here there's nothing. You should feel just a little tiny bit of the blade showing. So if we flip this back over, we have a couple different adjustments we can do. There's this knob here, which when we bring it out or forward, will bring the blade down or up. I'm not worried about that right now. There's also this little lever right here that I can move left to right. What that does is it actually takes and changes the blade this way so that, like I told you, it's high here and low there. Well, all I gotta do is take my adjust and then there. That right there actually feels like it's pretty level. And it's all the way kicked over. Next, I don't have a lot of blades sticking out. I could just barely feel it on the one. So I'm actually gonna bring my blade down just a little bit. Well, McMullen, how far should the blade be down? The biggest mistake that most people have when they get these is they've seen videos, or it should just be taken and just working it so quickly. Paper thin shavings, where you can almost make transparent shavings where when you hold them up to the light, you can see through them. These were not designed to take off 1/8 of an inch at a time. Paper thin shavings. If you try to take off more than that, you're going to have problems. You'll get snipe, chatter. It's just not good. So I've got it where the blade is just barely sticking above. And again, carefully feel. That blade's sharp. I'm gonna set it on here. I don't go straight on typically. I just kind of put it a little bit on an angle. That's just always me. That way I increase the surface area that's gonna be riding on the board. Here and here, I gain just a little tiny bit of a fraction. So you can already hear it, it's working. And I'm not getting, there's a low spot in the board right here. You can see it's not cutting yet. So I'm cutting here and here. And again, I'm starting with the blade off the board, going all the way across and finishing out. Okay, so let's stop there. All these shavings, I'm gonna put in my trash. I don't want to dump them on the floor, just swept. It is what it is. But I'm gonna stop right there and I'm gonna take a shaving and look at it. Okay, so here's a shaving. It broke apart because it's oak, but let me put it back together so you can see it. There's my shaving. You want to look at the shaving. Is it thicker on one side than the other? Is the thickness of the shaving across the width the same? I'm going to try to get a good one for you. So we can talk about it. All right, let me take a look at this and see if I can't get a good shaving for you. That's a pretty decent one. Right there. We can look at the one that's still on the board. Hopefully you can see this in the camera. So we're going to look at this, and it's tough because oak is very, not prone to chipping. What word am I looking for? It's a porous wood, so it doesn't want to take a clean shaving the whole width. It wants to curl up into separate pieces. But let's look at that shaving. What we want to look for is that you have the same thickness on both sides, so that way if it's thicker on one side than the other, then your blade is pushed over, and we can use that adjuster to actually take and move our blade left or right. Again, keep taking on your scrap wood, practice wood, before you use an actual, on your actual project. Take and get it so that the thickness of the shaving is the same on both sides. Once you're there, you're good. Also, look at the shaving. This is thin. It's very thin. If I hold it up to the light, I can see through it. That's perfect. I got lucky. Sometimes it takes multiple, passes and setting changes, but I got lucky. It's also cutting very clean and smooth. So that's a good bonus. So the other thing I want to do right now is I'm going to go grab something that has a flat, straight edge on it. I happen to have a nice ruler over here on my workbench that I'm going to grab. And this has a nice flat side. And I'm going to put it up here. What I want to look for is to see if I got any high or low spots. And the answer is I got a little bit of a dip in the middle. So my board, if this was an actual project board that I wanted to joint on one side, my board, and this is way over dramatized right now, is actually going and dipping in the middle. Just a little tiny bit. So to fix that, I need to take off on the outsides. And again, I'm keeping this flat. I don't want to curve this. I'm trying to keep it as flat as possible. And we're going to come over here and take a little bit off. And I'm constantly feeling, your fingers are going to tell you, let's take a look. Wow, that's not bad. There's a little bit of a low spot here. I took a little bit too much off, so I'm going to come back here. And I'm just falling short of down here now. We're going to come back, we'll check it. That's perfect. I can't see light through any of this. There's no roughness left from the sawmill. This board's jointed. Now the last thing I'm going to check, I got to go get a square to do this, is if we did this right and we held this perfect. I got my square here. And you could also use, the flat end of the square up here to check it. But remember, the point of joining a board is to create a 90-degree corner right here to the surface. Let's check it. McMullen's good. There's no light showing right here. So my board, that's jointed. So I know you're thinking, well, McMullen, that joiner that we had at school, that would be a lot faster. Yes, it would. That's why it was invented. Power tools make hand tools not necessarily obsolete, but again, it's faster. But think about it. If you had a board that was only 10 inches, the rule at school is a board has to be a minimum of 14 inches in order to be jointed. Well, I found this board in the scrapwood and I really need to use it, but it's not jointed. You can grab a hand plane. Technically, there's no minimum on this. McMullen, can I joint end grain? Not on the joiner at school, the power joiner. However, this, technically yes, you always want to go from the edge to the center and not all the way across because you'll chip it out. So if we were going to joint this, flip the board over, I'd joint halfway, come the other way and joint halfway, and then probably use some sandpaper or a scraper to clean it up. Joining end grain, it's always messy no matter what you do. The best thing is to make a clean cut with your saw. But this I'm really happy with. And again, we use nothing but hand tools. I did use that wire wheel. It is sharp. I'm okay. I didn't cut myself. I could just feel it. I did use nothing but hand tools though to sharpen that. It took me about a half hour to get that sharp. So, and you can see it's sharp. It's cutting through that oak. And this is really nice and smooth. Like, that will not need sanding. That's how nice and clean this got. The last thing to tell you too, if we wanted to knock down the corner, these corners are actually sharp, especially when you get into hardwoods. These corners can be very, very sharp. So we would just want to knock them down real quick. You could use sandpaper, could use a file real quick, but this is where the hand plane, just a simple hand plane, really plays in. I can put that at an angle, and I already know I'm only going to take off a little tiny bit, and just kind of come back, and they call it easing the corners. There. Just to knock down those corners so it looks decent. You'll also notice I'm setting the hand tool, or the hand plane down, so that it's not actually sitting on my workbench as much as possible. I'm trying to protect that blade. The sharper you can keep that blade, the better you're going to be. If you're using your hand plane and you're getting chips that are real nasty, or it's getting really hard, or maybe even you're planing and it's going, try switching the board around. Sometimes that will help. If you're still getting what they call chatter, where you're going and it's going and leaving these ridges along the sides, sharpen your blade. Or you're trying to take off too much. More than likely though, it's just a dull blade. Remember, we're trying to get paper thin slices with our hand plane. If you've got any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to message me through Remind. I know I have supposedly office hours from, noon or 12:30, I'm sorry, to 2 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But the reality of it is, if you message me outside that, I'll probably get back to you unless it's like the middle of the night or something. And who knows, maybe still I will. But yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm trying to think of some projects we can build, or I can try to build out here. I know Mr. Epperson messaged me about a flag for his brother-in-law, a flag, like a display. Trying to think of some other things. I've been seeing a lot of birds, and my daughter made the comment about, we need a bird feeder. Maybe we build a simple bird feeder. I know it's corny, and it's like I'm in high school, a bird feeder. But think about it. If we're building a bird feeder with all just hand tools, I won't use anything electric. If we're just using hand tools, it may take a little while. So I don't know. I'm going to come up with something. The other thing I encourage you to right now is there's so many resources online. If this interests you as a hobby or just in general is interesting, check out, like on Reddit, the subreddit woodworking. There's some neat things that people post. That's a good one to go to. Find Woodworking, Popular Woodworking. Those are all great sites. The New Yankee Workshop with Norm Abram, even though he is technically kind of retired, all the videos are available, and it's like the Bob Ross of woodworking. Even This Old House is a great show to watch just for general ideas. So there's plenty of resources out there online. Just explore a little bit. If there's something you find that you're like, man, this would be really neat to build when we go back, shoot me a message. I'll tell you whether or not it's realistic, or maybe we start planning for it ahead of time. We've got all this time. Why not? So stay in tune with what you're doing. I know, we're not all going to become master carpenters or furniture builders, but it's the idea of a lifelong hobby, learning how to use a tool, the math involved, and it's simple math, our 90-degree angles and so forth. So it is relevant in that aspect. All right, enough of me talking and philosophizing. I can talk forever. I know somebody already commented, McMullen, you talk forever. I like talking. I'm by myself. Does that mean I'm crazy? Oh well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Stay in touch, and stay home and stay safe.